Hey guys, so this is just a quick recap of what we did in part 1. And what we basically did was work on the proportions, on the values, and on some more detailed and refined color usage. But that is mostly what we'll be going over in this video. We're going to be really defining the portrait as well as working on the background and creating a smooth transition between the figure and the background. Again, this version is just 15 seconds long, just so you get a quick recap. But if you want to see the actual video part 1, it'll be linked down below. Make sure to check that out. Plus, I give a lot of instruction, as I will in this video as well, of my process. And the first thing that I'm doing in this part 2 is using a richer orangey red color to create sort of a mid-tone between the lights and the darks. And you can see that mid-tone on my right cheek, us as the viewer looking at the painting on the right hand side of the figure's cheek, as well as on the forehead and on the bridge of the nose. I think that it's very important to mention that there is a big difference between the values in the light and the values in the darks. And usually this is a group of values. So the ones in the darks are all usually from the mid-tone to the dark, and the ones in the light are from the mid-tone to the lights. And it's very important to not allow one group, whether it's the ones in the lights or the ones in the darks, to compete with each other. So you don't want something too light on the side that has most of the shadows, and you don't want something too dark on the side that has most of the lights. So I'm really trying to use the paints to build and build and build, and to make smooth transitions between the lights to the darks. And this is something also that's extremely important. When I'm working, I don't blend, and a lot of you have asked me a lot of questions about my blending, even when it comes to acrylics, and I guess more importantly in oils, since it is a lot easier to blend in oils. In acrylics, I don't blend. So when things look smooth, it's because I'm assuming the values are right. When something looks correct, when something looks naturalistic or realistic, is because the values are correct. It's not because there is a lack of texture or that it's smooth or that I blended it. Actually, what happens when I do a lot of blending is I lose a lot of the richness of the colors, and that can be a huge problem. And I see that happening in a lot of people's paintings who are amateurs. They think that everything looks better when you blend it, and you know, it looks good when you're up close, but once you look at a painting the way you're supposed to look at a painting, I would say about 3, 4, 5, 6 feet away from the painting, you start to see that the painting looks very amateurish. So now we'll be working on the background, and the background I usually like to leave even looser than the flesh, because I like that abstraction to compete with the more refined flesh. And as you can see, I'm really going from light to dark in the background. And on the right hand side of the figure is very dark, and right next to it, it's light, right? So right next to it is the background. The background is way lighter than the shadow on my portrait. Now on the left hand side, the shadow is a lot darker than my cheek. So it's kind of a push and pull. It creates a really nice illusion. And there is a reason that I chose this greenish bluish color, because you know, blue is complementary to orange and green is complementary to red. So having those colors together really allows for a great image. And I've seen so many artists do it. And you would think that since we know this complementary rule, artists, especially the old masters, would stay away from it. But most of the paintings that I've seen, that element is very predictable, where the background is usually a bluish greenish color and the foreground contains those really warm colors, and in the foreground there's usually a figure. So when I'm looking at paintings in museums, I'm always looking at this. I'm seeing what they're doing with the background. I'm seeing how they make their transitions from the background to the foreground, how they make their edges, what colors they're using. Is it a rich version of that color, or is it a dirty version of that color? And we usually find that it's never two rich colors. It's usually one rich and one muddy version. So you can see in this background, it's not really pure green or pure blue. It's a very dirty blue-green, whereas my portrait, the figure, is a lot richer. The color on there is much, much richer. And the way I really achieve that smooth feel, I already said, is through getting your values correct, but it's also to use a smaller brush. So you can see that in the forehead of the figure, I use a blotch of very light paint. It's like a lightish, yellowish orange. and then next to it you see a yellow orange, then next to that you see a red orange, next to that you see a darker red, then it goes to a brown, then it goes to the hair, which, you know, it's very dark, close to black. But those transitions from light to dark is what really gives the painting a smooth feel, where if you look at it up close, it's extremely textured and rough looking, and you know, it's ugly painting. So every time that I'm painting, I'm seeing that there's something that's off, so I'm constantly making corrections. I'm not really gonna leave the painting as it is and develop it if, let's say, the nose is in the wrong position or the mouth is in the wrong position or any features in the wrong position. I'm not really going to try to save the drawing or the painting. I really want it to evolve, and I want it to be accurate, and I want the figure to have that soul that I mentioned in that first video, in part 1 of this video. So my advice is, don't be too attached to the current state of the painting. Always try to make it evolve. If something is not in the right position and you really want it to be, don't be afraid to paint over what you've already done. And I also want to talk a little bit about the hair. When you're doing wet into wet, which this is what I'm doing alla prima, I'm painting wet into wet paint. The background and my hair will blend together, and I really like that feel because it gives the impression as if some hair is further away and some is up close, since it automatically blends. So I'd just like to say, if you haven't seen part 1, I highly recommend that you do. If you found this video helpful and informative, I think you'll definitely find that video helpful and informative as well. Especially since I start this painting from scratch, there's no previous drawing to work with. I start with just paint, and you can see the entire process. So that'll be in part 1, and that'll be linked down below in the description. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much for joining me, and see you next time.